What's going on with computers? Because I hear that Google, Facebook, Amazon, these like couple large providers basically run the internet. What's going on?
Well, that's a big question. And interestingly, the entities that you mentioned are actually just one layer of what we refer to when we talk about computers and the internet, right? Those companies, Google at least has an operating system, but like Amazon, Facebook, they're operating at the application layer. Amazon also obviously is a behemoth physical industry from shipping products and all the rest. But insofar as they're involved in
networking and computing,
in cyberspace, they are a hosting provider first and foremost, right? AWS is their real presence in that space. And AWS is a bunch of servers running around the world in secure locations that people can rent, by the hour, by the week, in order to host their software applications on Amazon servers. So to discuss the computing paradigm, I think, is the broadest general term for what we're talking about here, right? Computers are the physical aspect of the computing paradigm, and then you have the internet, which is the global networking, the broadest term for, the way people network around the world. There are operating systems, there are, different device classes, there is the entire application layer, there's the hosting infrastructure, right? So there's the computing paradigm is this amalgamation of, people that make hardware components to people that assemble computers to people that make operating systems to people that provide hosting infrastructure to people that write applications that run on operating systems. And it can get overwhelming very quickly. Which is why I'll take everything I just said and sort of leave it there and summarize the entire computing paradigm that we have today as cloud computing. That is what most people would call the dominant form of computing on Earth.
And when
today.
you say cloud computing, obviously you don't mean in a cloud.
For sure.
Right. Like the thing I always hear is this is like, cloud computing is just somebody else's computer.
Correct.
And so in this case, it's the...
Cloud computing is the very fluffy, gentle, friendly name that was put on this computing paradigm for marketability.
Okay.
I don't know how devious that was versus how just kind of good marketing it was to get the product and computing paradigm launched and accepted by the population. But ultimately, when I say cloud computing, I'm referring to all of those components and the way that they interact with one another combined. And so cloud computing has a couple defining characteristics, the most important of which is the client-server dichotomy, right? This division of computers into two distinct categories and attributing those two categories to segments of the population.
So just to clarify, so the client would be like my Android phone.
Correct.
And the server would be the Google Maps that's sending the data to the Android phone to be displayed.
Whatever application you happen to be running on your phone is connecting to some server somewhere. And even under that layer, that server, that piece of software, because server also has two meanings. Server has the software meaning, which is that this is the server-side program, and then there's the server, which is the physical hardware that it's running on. And so these apps on your phone are connecting to software servers that are also running on hardware servers that are usually owned by Amazon. So even if these competing apps are all different servers, ultimately they're all still running on physical devices that are owned by an increasingly small number of entities.
And I think that was probably part of why I phrased the question in that way, is because to me, the line between compute, I remember my first computer, dial-up internet, couldn't use the phone while you're on it. Like, to me, there was a clear distinction between computing in my living room, sort of the things I could do offline, and then the internet connected computer where I'm now running services that are being, relayed from servers, right? Well, today it feels very much like the internet is just computing. And I think it's partly because of this cloud computing paradigm, because like when you download the Android phone, or when you get an Android phone, it's running a Google, even though Android's open source, it's a Google operating system, and they're Google Cloud, and like all of these services, like essentially like you get to a point where it feels like hardware is almost unusable, or at least heavily mitigated in what it can do without relying on these cloud computing servers to do most of the computation, to do most of the heavy work, and the client's just sort of like how you connect to that.
Well, their existence is largely obfuscated at this point, right? Like you said, in the early days of the internet, America Online, it was very obvious when you were going online.
Right.
And when you weren't online, you were offline.
Right.
And it was understood, at least implicitly, that was inherently private and secure on the device that you were using. Well, those lines have gotten very blurry. And the cloud is moving in, right, to the client. The server is encroaching upon the clients. Your phone is increasingly always connected, always syncing.
That's why my Samsung TV is sending out 600 pings at 3 a.m.
I saw some post on X earlier that somebody was like, "Why is my washing machine doing 200 gigabytes a month of data or something?" And they were like, "It's blowing up my internet bill, and it's a washing machine." Clearly,
custom cycles.
I hope there's a bug somewhere there, but because that doesn't make any sense. But I mean, so the end result of this is, I had originally said that one of the defining characteristics of the cloud computing paradigm is this client-server dichotomy. Well, the end game of that is that the clients are strictly remote controls, that there is no compute or data storage performed on the client at all. And you're seeing this increasingly, right? There was a period of time where client devices like phones were touting how much storage they had, where they were like, "Oh, you can get this 32 gig one for $200, and you get the 64 gig one for $300.
Now I get the smallest
and everyone's like, "Just get the smallest one. Why would you pay more for more storage?" Because it's no longer on the device. Nothing is on the device. But it's not just the data storage. It's actually the compute now, right?
Well,
you are truly just seeing graphical interfaces now on your phone. Every button, right, at the extreme is a remote API
it's calling
call.
a server.
It's an AJAX request that is performing compute on the server. So everyone is just walking around with remote controls. We're all just using someone else's computer, and in fact, we're all using the same person's computer, and that
Daddy
has problems. There are problems with this model.
So 2 questions that I thought of as you were saying that. First of all, if that's the case, why do Apple, Google, Samsung, all of the major phone manufacturers, why do they continue to sell newer hardware with incremental, faster processors? Or, it really is just like the camera that seems like the biggest thing that they're...
And battery.
And the battery, which is the things that they can still control on the client.
Well, and the chips matter, because lag, latency, any kind of client-side lag is going to give you a competitive disadvantage. Like, people want to feel like their finger is a powerful wand, and every button they click gives them instantly what they want. Like, there can be no latency. But when you're making network requests,
that's what's happening.
It's inherently built in, so then you can get really clever with like caching and background tasks, and it's a complicated game.
The second thing I was thinking was, like, when you mentioned like the computing going on the cloud, I know like Google has been just being an Android user, like they tout like the new and improved tensor chip, and like the photo, the magic blur, and like all of this stuff that they can do. But correct me if I'm wrong, I thought that compute, like that level of like magic blur or whatever, was done on the client, on the phone itself. It is. But is that a new paradigm that we're going in a direction? Is that a completely different thing? Like, why is that unusual that Google did that?
It wouldn't be feasible, given sort of some laws of physics, to outsource everything to a remote server, right? So your client device is still going to perform a bunch of computation, and the client-side chips matter. You're actually seeing a lot of improvement in the chips. It's more about data, right? The client is not responsible for data. It's going to perform some literal compute, like stuff run on the chip. But any kind of analytics, right? Anything that is running compute on data. So if you're seeing charts on your phone, like usage
Big
over
data,
time, stuff like that, none of that is coming locally. All that data and all the processing of that data is being performed on the server. The client device can do these menial tasks of like prepare the data for the server, right? Touch up the picture.
Clean it up. Yeah,
clean it up, ship it to the server, right? But nothing of value is being kept on the client. The client is just it's a remote control and sort of a servant of the server, which is odd because it's supposed to be the other way around.
Right. And
the
you're
server
paying
has the name server for a reason. It's supposed to serve the client. But it's actually been inverted.
I've never thought of it that
way. Which is
way.
somewhat representative of our entire political infrastructure in society as well.
What a paradigm
Public
shift.
servants are now being served, right?
Yeah. The server, what has changed as a result of that change in dynamic where the server has the power now instead of the client? The server becomes the most important part. Is like how has that affected how we compute and how we interact with computers?
Well, it means you own nothing, first of all.
Better be happy too.
Yeah. I don't think that the cloud computing paradigm came about out of some sort of evil genius intention.
Maybe genius.
Sure.
But not malicious, it sounds like.
Not totally.
Yeah.
There was some understanding, I think, but it was also one of those like, well, someone's going to do it, right? This is just business. It's just the natural progression of this technology. Why not me?
We're the good guys. We should do it.
Right, sure.
Yeah.
So, I understand why humanity did what it did over the last 20 to 30 years, right? Through the evolution of computers. Computers were this mind-blowing, huge moment for humanity and in human history. It changes things, right? Humans are an animal that uses tools. This is our arguably defining characteristic, is that we obviously are a rational animal. We have reason, but we implement that through tools. Like tools are our competitive advantage. Without tools, a tiger would rip us apart. With tools, they're nothing.
Right.
So the computer is the tool for the brain.
Right.
So if the brain, the rational mind, is the defining characteristic of a human being, and then a tool for the brain has now been invented, right?
It's like, augment it.
It's exponential. It's actually a recursive function because the tool improves the brain improves the tool improves the brain, and you end up with AI.
Yeah, here we are.
And now you have the singularity and all the rest. But this is a big moment for human history, and it was so big and so kind of fast that we just kind of ran headfirst.
We didn't think about the
Right?
implications.
Even if we did, there's no stopping the energy, the release of energy,
behemoth.
right? It's like trying to contain a bomb.
Right.
Computers were invented, deal with it, right? Like it happened. And it was a chaotic race for spoils of that invention. And I get why the cloud computing paradigm emerged, because the alternative was a totally distributed computing architecture, which would require individuals to be able to administer servers, right? There is inherently, in my opinion, and this can be argued, and I'm down to have that argument with anyone who wants to, there's a need for servers and clients.
Like that relationship should exist.
There will
It's the
always
most
be
efficient.
servers and clients. Yes,
Okay.
I do not believe in serverless. Serverless is a fad term that people say to raise money, but servers are not going away. Servers serve an extremely important function in the computing paradigm, which is that they are always on, always connected, always running. They're running background processes, whereas clients are expected to interface with a user. They're expected to have direct user interaction, and they are expected to go offline. They're expected to be unavailable at times. And so if you had no servers, there's a chance that I wouldn't be able to reach you if I wanted to message you.
If it was offline
Yeah.
at that time, okay.
And if it's always online, then it's a server. So as long as you define a server appropriately, which is a computer that is always online and always connected, always running background tasks, such that you, the human, with your remote controls can go do things and turn things off, but your presence in the digital realm remains, then it's a server, which means a phone could be a server. Anything could perform the function of a server. Certain computers are better at performing server functions than other types of computers, but any computer, in theory, could be a server.
Right. Just like just to go to
any computer could be a client.
And any human can go eat at a restaurant, or any human could go work at a restaurant and be a server.
Yes.
You can play either role, but server computers that are going to be servers typically are specially purpose-built, whether they're fault-tolerant or high availability or power-efficient. There are certain things, or headless with no monitor. There are certain things that you'll install in a server environment that you maybe wouldn't do in a client.
And vice versa. Correct. So it's any computer can be a client, any computer can be a server. But once you realize that there are these two fundamental different types of computers, then why not optimize them? Why not create clients that are really good at being clients and servers that are really good at being servers?
And the goal of the server is to be always online, just to like summarize what you were just saying, to be always online and to serve data when needed to the clients.
Servers are responsible for maintaining network connectivity, for receiving any kind of external communications, for sending out anything that needs to be sent out, for storing and processing data in mass. Like servers are designed, should have very powerful chips, lots of storage, lots of RAM. Clients don't need all this. Clients need good chips, but very rarely are they going to need a ton of RAM or a ton of storage, because that's the server's job. Servers are better at doing that. So this is exactly what we have today, right? The only negative here is that everyone's using the same giant server. Is you can think of the internet today, and this is an exaggeration, but you can think of the internet today as one giant computer in the middle of the earth.
It's like a big honeypot.
And every single person's remote control is just connecting to it. And an increasingly small number of people have control over that one giant computer.
Increasingly small, meaning that we're getting closer.
It's consolidating.
It's going into that direction.
There's fewer and fewer. Once you dig past all the shell corporations and LLCs, at the end of the day, there's like a few people controlling most of the world's computer infrastructure, and even behind them are government warrants.
Always has been.
And eminent domain laws that basically put all of Earth's computing infrastructure in the hands of a few politicians.
Ooh, that's what we want.
And so, who cares, right? Like, why is this bad? Well, in any time of history, in any period of conflict, if you were to ask the generals and the combatants of that time, whether peacetime or wartime, just what is necessary to be successful, secure, victorious in any battle or any potential battle, and they'll I think tell you two things that you really need to think about. I'll add a third, but the first one is military power, right? Which is weapons. Just pure defensive and offensive power. Number two is comms, right? Information, the ability to coordinate that power.
I would say knowledge, information is power, right? Knowledge is power.
Sure.
I mean,
knowledge is less power than it ever has been, because knowledge is cheap now. Knowledge is abundant. It's the ability to utilize it effectively that is the hard part now. Yeah. But it's still in that same category. It's information, right? It's the ability to access and use information.
Information is so important. I'm like, as you're saying, I'm thinking like war, information, knowledge, the Byzantine generals problem.
Yes. You're
literally at war. You have a bunch of generals. You have the power, but you don't have the information or communication to coordinate. This is the whole...
It's about... It's physical, military might, and then it's comms.
What was the third?
The third I was going to say is propaganda. It's the ability to garner support from your team and demoralize the opponent.
Yeah.
So those are the categories of war, right? You have your physical might, you have your communications, and then you have your ability to
Is there
garner
is there a resource that you learned that from?
No,
or
I'm making this up.
Okay.
Right now.
It seems legit though.
Yeah. No,
I'm not asking.
Yes,
for
I've
you
read a lot. I
for
cannot
you,
cite my sources right now.
I'm not asking.
I'm speaking off the cuff, but like I said, I added that third category while we were sitting here. So of course I'm not being thorough and I'm not citing sources, but this is my understanding of conflict and of war based on my own reading and study of history.
Well, the reason I asked that is because it sounds to me like many books have been written on this topic before. I
have never read a book on the nature of warfare. I've read a bunch of history, a bunch of biographies, and a bunch of fiction, and that is what I've garnered from those.
Well, it seems like they are all deeply connected. I mean, I studied rhetoric. That was my minor in college.
Nice.
And it was a useless minor, but learned about
being able to use it is not useless.
Exactly. and I think they are tied together, because what happens is you spread misinformation through rhetoric or manipulation, which then garners the support for physical aggression. Yeah. And the cycle repeats itself. And
you could argue that even, propaganda is a subcategory of comms or something, but again,
sure,
you can categorize these things on different
But they interplay
axes
with one another.
And so what's the problem with everyone communicating through one giant server, right?
Got all the information.
It is now impossible to organize in any meaningful way against an enemy, right? There is no way for us or anyone.
They know your playbook.
To talk to each other and spread truth or lies, whatever is necessary for our, goal, and coordinate and organize in defense or offense without it being, intermediated, censored. Like, how do I know it's you?
Right.
It's a really hard problem. You're talking about an age-old problem, but that today is all done through these remote controls that we call clients, phones, laptops.
So is it more of an existential threat then to the group and our ability to proliferate as a group than it is like any one individual's data? Like, is the bigger problem not that maybe I got photos on, this platform and so other people do, but that the nature of that convenient relationship is really like what it conditions you to act like maybe the communication is the biggest part.
So yeah, I mean, I came in from the opposition angle of being like, well, what about a resistance? What about a rebellion? How can that even happen if you have no comms under your control? Right. It can't. But there's also this other, more present, current, and pervasive problem, which is that the centralization of communications infrastructure is also a tool of oppression. So not only is it a tool of oppression, it's a tool that prohibits retaliation or rebellion against that oppression, right? So comms can be used. I mean, information is everything, right? So like control over information is arguably more important than physical military power in the modern world, in a postmodern society, because if you don't know where the enemy is, who the enemy is, where the enemy is moving, nukes don't matter.
Right, your force is ineffective.
Yes, you can have as much advanced firepower as you want, but if you don't know where to point it and when to point it,
right,
it's pretty useless. And we've seen this with the American empire in its recent police operations over the last few decades, which is where we're basically losing against sticks and stones because we don't have control over the information in that area, largely because those areas are not plugged into the grid.
Right.
You go off the grid and it's like you gotta you got to get old-fashioned. All this advanced technology doesn't matter. But,
Right. Well, the internet was a
the United
military
States
invention.
government would have a lot better time, easier time, conducting warfare against American citizens than it would against Afghani citizens.
Because of the interconnectedness.
Because they got us.
Right.
We're all plugged in. Whereas the citizens of Afghanistan are not. It's
Right.
actually a lot harder.
Make it easy for them.
We're in the matrix. And
How's your pod? In the matrix, pretty comfy.
I don't think about it every day. I try to.
No, I feel.
No, I tell you what, it is
great.
pretty comfortable.
Yeah.
They make it pretty comfortable. At least historically, things are getting a little
Right, so you
less
don't leave.
comfortable now.
So you
Right.
don't leave.
But they can, right? Because what the fuck are you going to do about it?
And they know what
What are you
makes
gonna do about
They know
it?
what makes you comfortable because they
Can't
got
do
data
anything.
and all that too.
Can't do anything. Every once in a while, they'll open up the streets and people get out there and let some steam off and
Right.
back to work.
Gosh, that was like what 2020 felt like. It was like everybody woke
Steam.
up for a few months, and then I read something today that said the NFL had like the highest viewership this year in like a decade.
Yeah.
People are falling back asleep. They don't care.
Sublimation works, right? You have an emotion, a lot of energy. You got to get it out somewhere. Go hit a
Yeah.
punching bag,
Right.
Well, anyway.
I mean, is that like I guess like is that one of our biggest risks to using this centralized, coordinated? Is that we like infrastructure? Is that it's like a slow, steady drip of complacency, and it works, and it's comfortable, and it's nice in the pod, and like you don't need to own anything because you'll be happy anyway. Like, is that I analogize that to like Bitcoin and the ETF, where it's like, yeah, is the ETF going to kill Bitcoin tomorrow? No, but will it usher in a level of complacency that could be an existential risk down the line? Maybe. Do you think it's the same kind of thought process where it's not what they're doing that's so bad that they're not evil, but yet it's the level of what they're doing incentivizes that could be sort of the Trojan horse, maybe if it's unintended? Yeah,
there's a lot there. You brought up the ETF. I mean, we were talking about that earlier today. Obviously, everyone was. That happened today. In case this is recorded out of time.
It'd be like a week or two.
Let's see what I should grab from that.
Basically, is complacency the real threat?
It always is, right? Like a well-informed, armed populace that cares about current events cannot be enslaved, cannot be conquered. So it doesn't matter what the tool sets are, digital or analog. It is the complacency. It is the lack of information and lack of will to obtain that information because it's out there, right? Again, knowledge is cheap today. Anyone can pretty much figure out what's going on to some depth by just putting in the work. But people don't put in the work, and so it's very easy to look at that and draw a couple conclusions of we're screwed or those people don't matter, and it's only the people who do it that matter. And
like the people who put in the work.
I really don't look at this as to me, politics and culture are derivatives. They are not the driving force of history and of the given form of a given society. Technology is.
They're derivatives of technology?
Yes, correct.
So technology is what shapes the path forward, and those are like...
Technology sets the incentive structure. So technology sets the rules of the game, and then you can basically predict...
how it's going to be played based on that.
To some degree of accuracy, what culture will arise and what political structures will arise from that technology. This is the essential thesis of Sovereign Individual, which I'm sure a lot of people listening to this have read, and if you haven't, you should. It postulates that technology is the primary, and there are a couple others, but that technology is the real primary driving force of human history, and that with each new advancement in technology, politics and culture and political structures adapt to that new rule set, an incentive system, and then you just get what you get.
Right.
And so within that, there's a lot of wiggle room, right? You can almost think of it like a boat on a river. Like you can drive from shore to shore. There can be flare-ups of one, cultural phenomenon and another, but it's all going in the direction that technology incentivizes, because you cannot change human nature, at least not from one generation to the next. Right. There is many eons of evolution built in.
Hard-coded in.
You're not going to change our nature. And so when you line up human nature with the rules of the game, you can basically predict how the players will play, because they're going to play to win. Everyone's going to play to win insofar as they understand the rules.
And so if technology dictates the sort of societal, or not dictates, but can sort of predict the flow of culture and politics, would you, some argue that technology makes people more complacent, gives them less ability to think for themselves, sort of, fosters this groupthink. But then I'm also, as I'm hearing you say that, I'm thinking, well, it's not so clear, because technology also is sort of the cutters that breaks the shackles free, only to then maybe be in a new type of shackles in a few years.
Technology is sort of definitionally, at least insofar as this conversation is concerned, leverage on human productivity.
Leverage on human productivity.
With a tool, right? You can almost equate tool and technology here, right? Any tool is a form of technology, right? Like a hammer is a technology.
Right.
We use the term a little bit more specifically these days to mean digital things.
Digitals, right.
But the term is more broadly usable to mean, forms of tools, right? Different categories of tools or technologies. And each of them was invented for a purpose, which is to take a human unit of energy output and multiply it, right? So in the same 5 minutes, I can do X amount more in any given activity than I could before. And this can be, you can even apply this to like weapons, right? Like I expend this much energy,
right,
and look at what happens, right? That is technology. And the same thing with a computer, right? I do this, and ChatGPT writes me an essay. Right. So technology is leverage on your productivity. And depending on what you want to produce, that can be incredibly good and wholesome, or it can be incredibly horrific, depending on what you're trying to do. Technology will just amplify it. And it changes the nature of what you're doing as well, right? So the nature of warfare, for instance, changes with technology. It's not just the amount that you can do in a strictly quantitative way. It changes the quality of the output, right? There's categorically different qualities of output.
It's like rewriting the rules.
Correct. So these are technological revolutions as opposed to technological evolutions, right? And in technological evolution, you're just getting more and more efficient at one kind of activity. But then something comes along that changes the game, and it completely restructures human society, and then it optimizes in an evolutionary sense. And these are happening at an increasingly frequent rate. These revolutions in technology,
breakthroughs,
because that's the nature of technological growth.
So we're going to hit the singularity eventually.
Well, that's still up for debate. To some definition of that, yes. But what that means is entirely up for speculation. Like how society is restructured as a result of general AI.
What we're talking about, just to be clear, in the form of a tool, in the most basic way, because I know computers are built upon abstraction on top of abstraction, and I think your BitDev's presentation talked about this a little bit. Just to like level set, we are talking about the ability to adjust voltages. That's all it is, right? Like that's what a computer is. It adjusts voltages really fast.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, if you're getting down to the gates, the electrical
but
level,
that is what is actually happening.
Sure.
But what's crazy is like all of these things that we're talking about are as a result of our ability to create a tool that can adjust voltages, really small amounts of voltages really fast. That realization to me, and just like how we can get from here to where we're at from a society, political, cultural, because that's what we're talking about. Like we're saying technology shapes politics, shapes culture.
Well, look,
and that's what that is.
Post the invention of the computer, it's unrecognizable
right.
from what it was before in ways that nobody could have predicted.
It's crazy.
You show today's world to somebody from the 1970s, which, by the way, they're still
alive.
Yeah. They'd tell you you're a nut job.
Yeah. Well, they say that anyway. They're like,
I know.
Well, kids
they had to go through that change, which is
and
not
they don't
an easy
believe
thing to do.
They still don't believe
of course. Could you? I mean,
no. I mean, I don't believe half the shit we.
I don't blame them for half of their mindset. Like it's tough to change that quickly. Humans are not designed to do that. We expect the world to remain somewhat predictable and constant. And it doesn't happen because our brains ossify.
So
our ability to make fundamental changes to our understanding of reality gets more and more difficult as we get older.
I feel like I'm getting there.
I'm set. Fuck you. I'm not changing. I'm done. I mean, it's like something you really strive to hold open for as long as you can.
Bitcoin was the last big thing.
You can feel it closing in. You can feel it like, no, I know who I am. I know what I believe. I know what the world is like. And
then it changes.
And then it changes on you radically in ways that you never could have imagined. And to keep up with that requires an enormous amount of diligence, time, energy expenditure. Like you have to be, and there are these people. There are people in their 90s right now who get it.
Oh yeah.
And I'm like, how did you do that? You really, you really kept an open mind. You had to fight for it. Yeah, and so it's possible, but it's rare, and it's not to be expected, right? I do not believe that the world's problems can be solved through education, culture,
Is it technology?
I think that the world's problems can be influenced positively through those things. And I commend anyone who contributes in those areas. I'm a huge fan of educators.
But we're talking about structural changes.
I'm talking about real long-term effective change.
Changing
structural
the
change. The only way to do that is to change the incentives. And the only way to change the incentives, really, I mean, you can change some political incentives, but again, that's operating at a layer above.
Right.
The ultimate base layer of the incentive infrastructure is technology. And as somebody who just always loved computers and loved technology and that was cool to sort of figure that out and be like, oh yeah, okay, I'm going to play at that level. I really want to play at that level. I want the longest lever possible. Right? I want to pull the lever and have it echo as far as I possibly can. And that's just a personal thing. That just gets me excited.
That is a great spot to transition to this next question, which we've been talking about computation, individuals, data, their ability to innovate and pretty quickly get left in the dust by technological changes, which we've discussed impacts the world in a profound way that we can't even possibly foresee. So, I mean, I'm running into this now, Matt. Like, I'm already feeling like my technical abilities and my understanding of the architecture of the tools that I'm using are already, and I spend a lot of time on computers, and I was just like you when I was a kid.
Grew up with it.
Just grew up with it, not just with it, but really took an interest in it. I mean, that's why we both work in this, in this line of work. And even then, I am like, I get on the Linux terminal and I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And so I wonder how much of this new paradigm or how much of this ability to utilize these tools in a way that benefits us is, gatekept by technical ability. And if it is that something that we're also digging a deeper hole into, where we're getting less and like more and more obtuse, where we like literally no one's going to understand how any of the tools they use work, or how any of the tools work.
Yeah. Like when it comes to computers,
because it's going so fast,
and just because it's a lot. I mean, there was a point not too long ago, a century ago, maybe 2 centuries ago, where pretty much everything there was to know, you could know by the time you were like 18. Now, I'm not talking about every little piece of knowledge of history. I'm talking about like the big stuff, the information of the day that could allow you to be successful in that day. Like humanity has gone vertical in the last 200 years.
Population, everything. Yeah.
Right? Like, and childhood is still defined by the old standards, just like everything is, right? None of the cultural or political systems have kept up with the rapid development of technology.
That's a great call out.
And so we still think about childhood as being a like 0 to 18 kind of thing, but there's a lot more to learn now.
Right.
And it's not just knowledge, it's actually different types of learning, right? You're not just, before it was like, you mostly had to have knowledge. Like knowledge was power, right? There was a time where doctors had their status because they knew a lot about medicine.
It's got the internet now.
The internet knows way more than any doctor could ever know.
And
the doctors are just using the internet now.
Yeah.
So what are the doctors doing? It's methodology.
Charging me a shit ton.
Well, for sure. But it's what is their particular skill set now? It's methodology.
So can they find the information?
It's the ability to search. It's the ability to query. It's the ability to guide.
To use the tools.
Right. So it's a different type of education. It's not just who can cram the most information in their head. Like the most valuable doctor 100 years ago would have been like a photographic memory guy who just knew everything there was to know. But the best doctor today,
Watson,
is a sort of, I don't know,
it's AI probably,
massive critical thinker, like just someone who's really good with logic, and to be honest, who's also like, good with people. Because when you go to the doctor, that's half the battle too. Right. It's not just that you want to get cured; it's that you want to be understood. That you want someone who feels like they're championing for you. Like it's being a doctor is not just knowing
communication.
But that's not how doctors are trained. They're still trained to memorize the fucking medical textbook and stuff. And so I don't know where I was going with that, but the educational systems are not preparing people for the modern world.
Like we're all getting like left behind.
Okay, so but to go back to your original question, which was around, the will you ever understand how this stuff works and does that matter? No. Some people will, but it's a lot to understand. So what does that mean, right? What does that mean for the average person who can't be expected to and will never understand the inner functioning or nature of the technologies that are critical to their lives? First of all, we can, and when I say we, I mean each family unto themselves, can choose a better form of education. My children will understand this shit because I will make sure that they understand this.
Right.
However, they still won't understand everything about everything. Okay, so at some point and in some category of your life, you're going to have to trust someone. Now, who you trust should be a highly selective process, right? You shouldn't blindly trust anyone about anything. But there are people in this world who could tell me something, and I would believe them without verifying what they told me, because they've earned that from me through prior validations. So everyone is going to be an expert in something. It's like hard not to be, right? Like humans tend to have an interest.
Really
and if
good
they
at
have
sitting
the
on the couch.
ability to do what they want to do, then they're going to get really good at something. And they will understand that thing. And they specialize. And specialization of labor is like a huge part of how society works and is really important. And if everyone tried to do everything, nothing would work at all. So it's really important. Specialization is really important. But then what does it mean for all the things that you're not a specialist in? Well, you have to find people in those categories who are specialists, but who have also earned your trust. And this is community.
So you need the knowledge and the trust.
Well, the knowledge
you need to find somebody with both.
You need to find somebody who knows how to access the knowledge. The knowledge is cheap.
Sure.
I can access any knowledge of any industry at any time in a matter of seconds. But I don't know what I'm searching for.
Right.
I don't know what questions to ask. But there are people who in this world who do know what questions to ask. And it's my job to find those people and befriend them. This is community.
Right.
This is the point of community. It's the point of friends and family and community, is this special, the inherent specialization of human nature. We cannot be generalists across the board. Even if you are a generalist, there's still things you don't know. You still have need for someone in your life to trust. And so it should be someone who has earned that trust, someone who you know personally, and that has proven to you through multiple experiments or trials that you can trust them. And so when it comes to computers, there's a very small number of people who actually understand how they work at every level or at any level, right? And so if you're not one of those people, you need to find one. You need a computer expert in your life.
Yeah,
just like everyone needs a car
guy.
mechanic. Everyone needs a car mechanic.
Good advice.
And everyone needs a computer expert. If you don't have a friend who really gets, Start9 is that. That's what Start9 wants to be. That's awesome. That is our purpose on this earth, is to be your computer expert. Yes, we build StartOS, which is an operating system that makes running your own server easier than ever before.
I run one. It's true.
Yes, we package cool software services that run on that server. All of this shit is free and open source. It doesn't in any way, shape, or form belong to us. Like literally zero. It is non-proprietary in any way.
That's where you guys are really
Our only role here is to support the technology that we have unleashed on the world. We release this new technology, and we know that nobody knows what the fuck it is or how it works or why it's important. We're here for you. We are your technical experts, and we are really good at this.
And you have to have that separation too, because otherwise there's not really any distinction between Start9 and the companies that are providing support for their own closed-sourced proprietary products, right?
Oh, I mean, we could absolutely have a proprietary license that says, no, StartOS is ours. Sure, it's source available. You can read the source code, but it's ours. We just show it to you so that we're not, doing anything malicious. And that's where we were. That was the type of license that we had.
Okay, what type of license was that?
Start9 started out closed source. Literally closed source. The code was not visible. We wrote the original StartOS, which was then known as EmbassyOS. And it was closed source and proprietary. And we sold devices like that. We sold devices with closed source operating systems to people. And we knew then that this was going to be a progression from completely closed source and proprietary to then source available with restrictions to source available with less restrictions to completely open source. We knew in 2020, early 2020 when we first launched this, that was our progression. And we did that for a couple of reasons. One, because we wanted to be the shepherds of this technology. Like it wasn't ready for anyone else to even look at, let alone work on. It was so crappy. It was just like, it's like even Bitcoin started out with one guy working on it, and then there was two guys working on it. And it's like everything starts off in one brain. Everything starts off in a single brain, or maybe a small group of people. But eventually it opens up. But it doesn't have to. A lot of people keep things for themselves. And we were called out on that a lot. The industry doubted us. They were like, no. You guys are like, you have a proprietary license, and it's like, you're not Bitcoin, you're not open source. And we're like, no, we have a strategy. Like, why are you trying to take the future and fast forward it to the present? Like, it's an instant gratification thing. It's like, no, some things take time, and this is our strategy. You can debate us on our strategy. You can say, well, that wasn't necessary. You guys could have started out as MIT and everything would have been fine. Maybe. That's armchair quarterbacking in retrospect.
You don't
when
know
we're making decisions in late 2019, this was our strategy. And we
you don't know what you don't know.
Stuck to that strategy, and ultimately made StartOS and everything that is available to run on StartOS completely open source according to the strictest definitions.
When was that final change to fully open source and from source available made?
Two or 3 months ago.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So I installed it when it wasn't then.
You installed it when it was source available.
Tells you
probably a single restriction, which is non-commercialization. That was the last.
Resell it.
Yeah, it basically just meant that we're the only ones that are allowed to make money on this.
Right.
Do anything else you want with it, just don't sell it.
Right.
That was the final restriction that we kept.
And you got rid of that too?
Yeah, we got rid of that too. It doesn't belong to us at all. So anyone on Earth, anyone listening to this, can tomorrow wake up and just call themselves
Steal your company.
Start 8, and or they might go for 10.
Start 10.
They want to be bigger.
Start 10.
And just do what we do. They could just install StartOS,
put a
on devices,
different number on it,
sell those devices, and provide support for them and charge for it. There's nothing defensible about what we're doing.
So obviously,
except for our own
the
efficacy and reputation. Nobody's going to match that. Like, this is what I had to realize too. This is something that I slowly came to realize over the years, which is that it's not the recipe that matters. It's the cook. Nobody is going to do what we do like we do.
And it's the service
Some people
support.
will try. There will be competing companies that sell plug-and-play hardware and provide support for StartOS, but we're the originals. We developed it. Nobody understands it better than us.
So there's a trust element.
It's a reputation. Yes.
Reputation.
Trust based on reputation.
Right.
So justified trust, we'll call it, right? Like, we've earned it.
Right.
Anyone who's been in our community knows that we've earned it. It is actually pretty crazy what we do. The reaction to us is universally like bewilderment. When someone comes into our support channels, whether that's email, Telegram, Matrix, our community forum, Twitter DMs, Twitter public posts, you name it. Whatever it is, it's like seconds before they get a thorough response from a human being that makes perfect sense. And they're just like,
crazy.
Whoa, how do you guys do that? And I'm like,
George is sitting there over your shoulder.
I'm crazy.
And you hire crazy people.
Yes.
People who are crazy passionate about what they're doing.
Yeah, and like everyone shares that here.
Yeah.
Like, we really care. And that's not going away. That's something we believe we can scale. That's actually something that every company fails to scale, and I think we can do it.
I was going to say, like, I mean, in my experience, it's always been like software scales super easy. It's the human elements that are tough to scale. Is there like, do you mind, like, do you want to elaborate on that a little more and like how that?
Yeah. So technology, when you say technology, I think what you mean by that, whether you meant to mean it or not, is like some new app. Okay, so let's say somebody writes an app for Android and iOS, and it does something cool, and it's all about monthly active users, and how many users you have, and how much of their data is valuable for advertisers, and how much monthly subscriptions you can cost. And they write this software, and this software is infinitely replicable for free.
Right.
And this is why VCs love that business model, because they're just like, oh, there's zero production costs, right? And you can provide shitty support. Nobody cares. Basically, if the app is cool and it replicates and you have more users,
there's no marginal cost.
It's just this bread and butter. It's just this butter industry. And we can talk about that because we're gonna crush it. Our plan is to like wipe $1 trillion off the market capitalization of the NASDAQ and replace it with basically nothing. Like, these companies just shouldn't exist.
Right.
It's not that they should be replaced with better companies, not that they should be smaller. It's that their entire existence on this earth is a fluke. It's a fluke. And they're worth dozens of billions of dollars. Yeah. Like, their market capitalizations are massive. Like Slack, let's just pick on Slack for a second.
Chat messenger.
It shouldn't exist as a company. The software is great.
Right.
Slack, the entity, has no business in this world. They add nothing.
They're headquartered here, aren't they? They have a big office here.
I have no idea.
I'm pretty sure they have a huge office here.
The company.
That's what I'm saying. Like, I think they have hundreds of thousands of employees.
The software developers build the software, and the software has value. But the software is infinitely replicable. Information wants to be free. Anyone can run it on their own server if it was open source. What's the point of Slack, the company? Slack, the company,
sales
is
channel.
literally just a defensive wall protecting the software. The entire purpose of the company is just to put spears up to prevent you from getting to the software.
Because it's closed source.
Of course.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's the company. SaaS companies, their job is defensive warfare, right? They basically have built something that is free by nature, and then they defend it artificially.
Right.
And they're not evil. This is a natural market selection that came about. So this isn't a moral condemnation. This is a practical condemnation. This is they have no purpose in this world anymore, because the only way that they can defend that position, if you think of this as a war, the only way that they can defend that ground is if there's no tunnel, is if there's no airfare. They're depending on this sort of feudal style of warfare. And then Start9 comes in and just completely changes the paradigm.
Right.
It's like, wait a second.
Them.
People can do what you do from home in 30 seconds. Mm-hmm. You can't defend against that. Slack has no defense. They were completely depending on your inability to do that. Mm-hmm. It's the only way SaaS companies can remain in existence is by they depend on your dependency. They depend on your lack of ability to run a server.
Sounds like a drug dealer.
And so all that had to happen to completely flip the entire cloud computing paradigm on its head and make it obsolete is to enable people, individuals, families, companies, organizations, to run their own servers. That's it. The whole computing industry changes if people can run their own servers effectively, because the whole computing industry is based on SaaS, right? We talked about cloud computing earlier. Cloud computing is the computing paradigm. SaaS, software as a service, is the business model.
On top of cloud computing.
On top of cloud computing, the paradigm. So SaaS, the business model, goes first. That dies first. Then cloud computing dies. I shouldn't say that. Cloud computing is restructured. Mm-hmm. It's still cloud computing, but instead of everyone connecting to one giant cloud in the middle of the earth, everyone is connecting to their own little mini clouds. You ever see, oh man, I have 2 little daughters. I can't believe I'm about to do this. I have 2 small daughters.
Embarrassing.
Do you ever see Frozen?
Oh yeah.
Where
Both.
Elsa makes Olaf his own little flurry of a cloud? Mm-hmm. That's what we see.
That's what you're doing.
It. Everyone gets their own little flurry.
You guys, y'all do need a mascot. Maybe
I don't think Disney will let us use
red and black Olaf.
It looks similar at all. We'll get soon.
Proprietary, man. Mm-hmm. A closed source. There we go again.
IP is just impractical. It's not. I'm against IP, obviously.
Well, let me ask you then,
but how? Anyway, that's a very complicated topic.
How much of your as running a company, startup, you're balancing, thriving versus surviving, right? You're balancing making the best software possible with your team making sure it's open and available and to everyone. You're trying to, sell servers, but also offer it pre-built, you sell pre-built servers, but you also offer the code free and you can install it yourself. So how much of your time do you spend thinking about threading that needle between the running a successful business and having some sort of defensibility to the great things that you've built?
I guess all of my time.
Sounds like
that is not being spent literally developing the technology, right? Or working on some very niche part of the business, but the overarching mindset is this tiny little crack between those two. Mm-hmm. And what's interesting is even early on, I said to my then partners, co-founders, I was like, we found the gap, guys. We found the crack that allows us to simultaneously build a business and personally profit and flourish from our efforts, and building something that is incredibly powerful and useful and good for our great grandchildren's.
Right, because you said Casa didn't want to be involved in that business line. Like that would, like they had the.
I wouldn't. Well, they didn't. I don't know if they thought about it like I just said it.
Right.
Right. Like I don't know what the thinking was, but they did choose to. Casa was perfectly positioned to be the leader, the leaps and bounds front runner in the personal server revolution, right? The making servers available to individuals, families, and businesses.
But that angle of like that thin little crevasse that you found as to run a successful business, but also build a great product, maybe that was something that you uniquely discovered.
They weren't positioned to thread that needle.
Yeah.
It was a different team with different skill sets, right? Threading that needle required what we had, which was 4 people in a room,
right,
ideologically aligned, who could give 2 fucks about the money, except for the fact that we really wanted the money. Okay, now I say that humorously, as in like, of course. Right. Of course we want to flourish. Of course we want to profit. Of course we want to succeed financially. But every single person
they're not mutually
involved was just like, it's not necessary.
Right.
We would never do that at the expense of the mission.
They don't need to be either or.
And so it took a dualist mindset of like, let's build a business and let's start a fire. How do you hold those two in tension without one overtaking the other? And the answer is diligence. It's literal constant checking. It's hiring people like David Croissant.
Smart dude.
Go ask David if he and I always see eye to eye, right?
I'm going to guess he says no.
I intentionally, not masochistically, but intentionally keep people who are ideologically driven around me to hold me in check. Yeah. And this is part of the incentive structure. So I'm an incentives guy, right? It's like,
no surprise,
I believe
like
all
Bitcoin.
Of society operates based off of base technological incentives, but then recursively, every structure within that society, businesses, departments within businesses, whole families, atomic families, they all recursively operate based off of incentive structures. And so in every aspect of my life, I try to consciously set up and continually rethink the incentive structures to make sure that everyone can simultaneously pursue what is in their personal, selfish best interest, such that it also contributes to the overall goal. Right. This is why Bitcoin is perfect and unique, is because it's the only system
taps into the greediness.
Like that does that. It's I wouldn't even call it greed. It's just
incentives.
Rational self-interest. It's like you cannot expect people to sacrifice themselves for others. I know that is the ideal of moral altruism.
But it's not rooted in reality.
But it's not real. And the expectation that people will do it is only going to lead to horror, because you build systems under the assumption that people will do that, and then they don't, and then it falls apart, and then everyone is left starving. This is what communism is, right? It's this idea that people are altruistic.
Right.
And will just contribute to the group.
Right.
It doesn't work, and so it all collapses. You have to lean into human nature. You have to understand what we are. It's beautiful. It's not like, oh crap, we have to accept the fact that we're self-interested. It's like, no, we're self-interested. Cheer it. It's what you are.
Right.
You have no choice. Nobody has any choice. It doesn't mean that you don't care about others. It just means that you are self-interested. You just have to understand that, accept it, and cheer it. It's like, yeah, flourish, do you, win, prosper. Just don't hurt anyone while you're doing it. Right. It's not that hard. So when we build at Start9, that is the thought process of every new feature, like really, like openly discussed in the office. We'll be like, okay, we're gonna give people the option to like do zero configuration ClearNet in the 040 release. Okay, so this idea that you're gonna be able to plug in your server, and without knowing anything about anything, you're gonna be able to click like 2 buttons, and your server is gonna be available on a custom start9.me subdomain, like mat.start9.me.
Right.
Your server's gonna live there. You didn't have to do anything, nothing, no certificate generation, no router configuration, just zero configuration ClearNet. And then your Bitcoin node can be at bitcoin.mat.start9.me. No configuration. Just type it in, done, okay?
Can't wait for that.
But here's the problem.
And the super long texts of...
Here's the problem with that. We're now involved.
Right.
So at the office, how did we approach this? We go, okay, so we know that people want this. So what is our responsibility here, morally? What is our moral responsibility? We need to give the people this. Right? This is what the technology affords. It's what people want. The damage that we can do in the extreme is minimal. So we always evaluate the extreme. We always say, if we implement this feature in the technology, what's the worst that can happen? The FBI comes into our office, gives us gag orders, says, here's what you're going to do. Mm-hmm. What's the worst that can happen? How much damage can we do to people's lives? If the answer is...
That is the worst
case scenario? If the answer is significant,
yeah,
I think that's the worst case scenario. I can't imagine anything worse than being gag ordered by the American government and forced to do things with your technology that you didn't want to do.
Yeah, that sounds pretty bad.
Or, I mean, there's definitely worse, but as a company, that's the worst. As an individual, I can think of all sorts of horrific things.
They can't torture you.
Right, but again, they don't need to. The gag order is enough. You're going to comply because there's the threat of force behind it.
Right.
You don't need to use force if you can threaten
it's
force.
Always on the base layer.
And it's right. So anyway, that we always think about that. We go, what if they do that? Because they're going to do that. I have no doubt whatsoever that if we continue to have success, that like we're going to be bombarded by these people. Yeah. And I want to be able to comply 100% and cause no damage.
Grin. We're complying.
Of course. No, I won't even grin. I'll comply.
Right.
I have to.
Right.
I'm not going to let you use force against me. I got a family. I got a whole thing. I'm going to comply. I'll do whatever you want. I know that I can't do anything. I'll comply 100%. Nobody can be hurt by me. Exactly. Yeah. So we always think about...
That's the only defense
What
strategy.
if we get coerced, threatened, bribed, blackmailed, etc.? Yeah. What's the worst that we can do to the people using our technology? And if the answer is horror, we don't do it. Mm-hmm. And if the answer is, it might inconvenience them for a day, then we do it.
That's a trade-off you're willing to take.
However, here's the thing. In addition to that, in addition to considering what the worst case scenario is and avoiding anything that's too bad, we also build an escape hatch for even the small thing. We call it the escape hatch. Every feature that we build that involves us in any way, meaning even if we could hurt you for 5 minutes, there's an escape hatch. There's a way for you to accomplish the same exact thing without us.
Can you give an example of that?
So ClearNet. Let's use the example I just came up with.
Okay.
So let's say that you choose to use a start9.me subdomain. Well, what are you giving up? We know a few things.
The domain control.
We know what services you're running on your server. Because those subdomains, all that DNS is being provided by us. It's dynamic DNS. It's our domain. We're going to be able to know a few things. We might not know your identity.
So you'll know if it's sent into Bitcoin.
But like, we'll be able to get some metadata on you.
Right.
We'll know your IP address. We'll know what services you're running on your server. That's not condemning, right? The worst case scenario, FBI agent walks in, they're like, this person of interest, this is their IP address, what services are running, we tell them. But it's like, when is it illegal to run open source software on your own computer?
Right.
So it's not great. We don't like the fact that we're going to be able to do that, but it's also not going to... It's not damning.
You have to draw the line somewhere.
So here's what we do. We show a giant warning, first and foremost. You are choosing to use a Start9 domain. What does this mean for you? What do we know about you? What can we do with it? What's the worst case scenario? We full disclosure of what harm can be done to you if we were to be fully compromised or disappear, for that matter. Just go out of business, right? What can happen to you? Step 2, how do you opt out? How do you do exactly the same thing that we are providing for you without us? And if we cannot provide that, like if that ability to opt out is not there, we don't build the feature. So we always obsolete ourselves in real time, which again, investors and traditional SaaS business models are just like,
money, man.
are just like, wait a second, you are intentionally making yourselves irrelevant.
Right.
And I'm like, yeah, but people will use us because we do that.
And
people will choose to use our services, our optional opt-in services.
Because of the trust.
Because we're showing them the exit at every step, and because we're giving them full disclosure at every step, and because everything we're doing is out in the open. There's no secrets, nothing is closed source.
That makes me think right back to what you were saying half an hour ago or so about if you don't have a computer guy, you need to get one. If you don't have a mechanic, you need to get one because you need to have that circle of trust because you can't have a proficient core competency in every subject matter on earth. And so what you're looking for and what you're willing to pay for even is that competency and trust.
Yep.
And so that's what you're essentially creating by saying, hey, like, here's the risks, here's what could go wrong. And here's how we've thought about that already before you ever even click download.
And here's how you can tell us to fuck off and go do it yourself.
You're building that trust, which is bringing people to your ecosystem.
And it's not just something we say. They can verify it.
Right.
Or someone who's extremely competent, right, their computer expert friend can verify it for them if they don't have that competency.
Do you think that the self-hosting world is getting easier? Because I feel like even like 5 years ago, me running a server was a challenge. And I'll say, like, I ran an Umbrel first, and then I got a Optiplex, and I installed StartOS on it, and I was blown away by how much better it is. But yeah, like, is it getting easier? Is it getting more complicated in some ways and less complicated in some ways? Or is it just because the hockey stick of everything you need to know is just going up exponentially, it's just becoming more and more overwhelming?
It is definitely getting easier.
It's getting easier.
Yeah, and that might not be at the pace that people want, and it's not a straight line, as in some things might be getting easier, but it's also bringing other things to the surface that people have never thought about. Right. So like StartOS, for instance, forces people to realize that things exist that they never knew existed, like root certificate authorities.
I didn't know what that was.
Nobody does.
Now I do.
But it's how
I got that little lock
it's the
on
whole
every
trust
browser.
basis of the internet.
Yeah, crazy.
It's what HTTPS, right? People know HTTPS and they know the little lock in the browser,
lock.
but they don't realize anything that's happening under the hood.
Yeah.
And it's all based on these certificate authorities. It's basically just
a few companies, VeriSign,
few companies in the world who are just like vouching for everyone.
Yeah, I saw it verified by GoDaddy.
And
verified by
if you
Google.
control the DNS and you control the root CA, you can man in the middle anyone on Earth.
So that's how these like fake wallet things come about, right?
This is Google. Google can man in the middle anyone.
Oh, because they can direct you to both. They're the biggest DNS.
And there's a few that have both. I can't rattle them off the top of my head.
Oh, gosh.
But the point is that like when you go to a website and it's like, this is a secure encrypted connection, you could absolutely 100% just be looking at a phishing website set up by the CIA.
You're trusting Google to authenticate those two things. That message that this is secure and encrypted is
you're
Google
looking at a
telling
website.
you that.
And it's telling you, your browser is telling you that this is the website, it's the real website, everything's good to go, and
According
it's literally
to
just some state actor or hacking organization.
And that's, and again, just to
and this
clarify,
can all
that's
be done
because
via warrants or otherwise.
So
right?
you just compromise the man in the middle, the DNS, and then they can send you to India.
The internet is a terrifyingly dangerous place. Oh, gosh. And here's the thing, not for everyone all the time. Nobody's a target. Very few of us are persons of interest. Very few of us are being targeted in these kinds of ways. The major danger to the average person in the current cloud computing and SaaS model today is dragnet surveillance, right? Mass data collection. Edward Snowden, revelations.
Just any kind of data. It doesn't matter what. They just want it all.
It's just like you're not being targeted.
The more data,
it's just
the better.
data, and then you're this slice, and there's a profile.
Because
and
they don't care about
and that's
you.
filed away. Yeah, you're a number with a threat rating and a history and a profile, but no human being is looking at you.
Right.
This is all just
Machine
shoved away
learning.
for future reference in case you ever become a problem. Okay. So dragnet surveillance.
In case you ever become
Of course not. It's leverage. Every button you've ever clicked, everything you've ever said, every picture you've ever taken, everything is collected. But nobody cares. Right. And there's a lot of people in this world who kind of get that to a degree, and they're like, well, I don't care. I got nothing to hide.
Right.
I don't care if everything's being collected. Well, sure, fine.
Right now,
but like you don't know what the future holds. You have no idea how this might be used against you in the future. It's
you don't know what the future's going to be like.
You have no
either.
insurance. You're just allowing someone to get leverage on you in ways that you don't even understand. So that's one. That's one threat. Number two is censorship. Now, this is not it's not a threat to most individuals. Like very few people are being censored. You have to have a decent amount of influence to achieve shadow ban status,
Right.
on
like
social media, or to be, deplatformed altogether. You have to be fairly influential. Most people don't actually face direct censorship of their speech, but that's because they have no voice. So why censor?
Nobody's listening.
Yeah. And so, but however, they're affected by the inverse of that. Is that what they're consuming, what they're receiving is the result of algorithmic censorship and algorithmic amplification, because it's not deplatforming. People think about censorship as like literal like black bagging and deplatforming.
No.
That's not how censorship happens. In the modern world, censorship is very subtle and very insidious. Censorship is algorithmic in nature. So messages that are approved are amplified.
Right.
So more people consume them without realizing they're even being amplified. And things that are disapproved are not censored outright. They're just shadow banned. They're de-amplified. They're suppressed so that the people who already have those beliefs see them. Right?
They're playing into that
so it's like I see this thing, so I'm like, oh, it's not being censored. Good. But you don't realize that nobody else is seeing it. You're only seeing it because you've chosen to see it.
The echo chamber.
Right. And so the rest of the world isn't hearing that message. You think they are because it's in your timeline, but it's not in anybody else's timeline. So the censorship is real. You just don't see it. It's very insidious because it's algorithmic and it's based
custom.
on it's customized.
And it's going to get more and more and more customized.
So that's number 2. Number 3 is this, the general invasion of privacy, which is like your data is literally being sold to advertisers, which has real consequences on you because like things that you thought were private are now like showing up to you in the form of advertisements on a different platform. And you're like, whoa, that conversation I had with Alexa was literally being listened to, and it's kind of spooky, and it really brings the whole thing home. And so, you have this dragnet surveillance, you have censorship, you have this invasion of privacy, this sort of degrading, undignified, like lack of adult privacy that humans, I think, have a right to. And then the last one, arguably the most relevant in any given day that very few people think about, which is the vulnerability of the data honeypots. So if I'm using somebody else's server to store all my DMs, right, with my friends and family, like I'm using WhatsApp or
Telegram,
iMessage, Telegram, you name it. I'm using their servers to message. That server gets compromised. Nobody was attacking me. These hackers didn't know I exist. They don't care about me. Right, well, that data can be used against you. Like it's not just dragnet surveillance where it's being shoved in a file and the chances of it being used against you are super slim. This is like, this is extortion where some hacker group gets all your private messages and they're like, ooh, this guy's talking with somebody he shouldn't be. Somebody his wife wouldn't like him talking to. Let's get some Bitcoin. Right? Like you are, like things that you think are private that are going through a third-party cloud. Like everyone's got secrets.
That's something that is really like I've never even.
I shouldn't say that
thought process. That's amazing.
A lot of people have secrets, right? Even if they're not these like earth-shattering, like my life
things
is ruined.
Things that could embarrass them.
But even exactly.
And you'll play on the emotional
just like
aspect.
I sent my wife a nude. Okay, it's like
right. You don't want that online.
Yeah, it has nothing to do with like something I'm hiding from someone in my life. It's just private information. Right. And it's like, suddenly I get an email that's like, hey, bro.
Want this on Twitter?
Check out the attachment on this email.
Yeah.
This is going everywhere unless you send me a Bitcoin tomorrow.
Right.
This is ransom. And so when you store your data on someone else's server, you were never the target, but you are now potentially a victim of this type of attack.
You might become collateral damage, even if you weren't the target.
I'm prepared to argue that this is incredibly likely, that this is not some sort of like fringe like thing. It's like if you have ever put anything on a third-party server that might be embarrassing or damaging to you, expect that it may someday be used against you. Because that information is never going to be deleted, which means if that server is ever hacked 20 years from now, it can be used against you.
Right.
And that is the number one reason that, again, most people don't think about, that you should get off of third-party servers. Just remove your data. Because when you put it on your own server, nobody's going to attack it. Nobody's going to hack it.
Because they weren't attacking you in the first place.
Yeah, you're not worth the attack.
It's not worth
It's incredibly risky to attack somebody, to hack someone.
Right.
You're risking imprisonment, right? You're committing crimes. It's the same as robbing somebody's house. And in this case, you probably would have to rob their house to get their server data, because the servers are protected by the same cybersecurity that ordinary servers are protected by these cloud servers, right? Encryption is encryption. Right. It's not that those servers are more protected than yours. It's that those servers are more physically protected than yours. They're in vaults in a bunker with armed guards at the door, whereas yours is sitting in your living room.
Abandoned
But
house.
here's the thing is nobody knows it's in your living room.
Right.
Nobody knows
they know
you have
where the
that.
Amazon AWS
Or even if they
database
don't,
is.
they know the person who knows. It's about social engineering. What I'm saying is that nobody knows you're running your own server, let alone where you keep it, let alone willing to risk physical break-in to access it.
So the defense model is
they don't even know what you have on it. It's
avoiding becoming collateral damage, because you're not the target in the first place. So the way that you protect yourself is by
opting out,
holding your own data, and when the big dogs get attacked, you're not affected by that. It's like today's ETF. I was talking to a customer and I was like, somehow my Bitcoin in self-custody are completely unaffected by today's announcement.
They might be worth more.
They might be worth more
I don't know what happened.
in dollars, which is also irrelevant, right? So
yeah, it's I like to use a physical analogy. Imagine a city under siege, right? Imagine you're living in a city and the enemy invades and they're bombing the city walls, and there's this like neat little tunnel that you can just leave and go to paradise with your family and have your own farm and live. But you're like, no, I'm staying in the city.
Right. When they're not attacking you,
correct,
particularly,
and sure, maybe
they just want the city.
The analogy doesn't fully hold up because you might feel some obligation to stay in the city and repel the enemy, but that's not the case here. You're not defending your own city. This is
I don't have.
This is your data on someone else's server. You don't care about their server. It's like, just leave, just get out of there. There's no reason for you to be here. And the thing is that people are in like 40 of these cities. They're all being attacked every day.
Oh my gosh!
Just get out of all of them.
Can you give some examples as to like things that are practical that people could self-host today? I mean, I know that what we're talking about is a bit of an idealism in that, like, we're not just going to go from using cloud computing everywhere to self-hosting everything tomorrow. But for someone who maybe is interested in the subject matter or wants to start taking actionable steps, aside from just, installing StartOS, I mean, I think like more specifically, like what services, what packages, what sort of applications and use cases are like the most readily obvious and apparent that you should be self-hosting?
Yeah, great.
Like pictures is the first thing I think of.
Great question. So the broadest answer to that question, and you're asking about today, so I'll start with not that, and I'll get to it in just a second. The broadest answer is that absolutely everything that can be done on the centralized, third-party based, trust-based, custodial model of computing can also be done in the edge computing, self-hosting paradigm. There's no limit to that. Even social media can be done in a decentralized manner per things like federated networks like the Fediverse and Mastodon to things like Nostr.
Right. Okay.
They're not as popular, but that's the nature of social media. I mean, you only want to be
Network
where everyone
effects,
is, and correct. So, but it will take eventually. It's just not the first use. It's not the first and best use case of a personal server. But basically, anything that can be done in the current cloud model can be done in the self-hosting model. Today, what are the best ones, the easiest ones, the ones that we recommend? So first and foremost, what we do not recommend is what most people do when they come into my world, is they want to do it all. They go, I'm ready. I'm ready to opt out of 40 cities that are under siege.
All at once,
They're just like, I'm taking control of my files and my pictures and my money and my passwords and my messages. And I'm like,
hold on there, slow your roll, buddy.
This is a hero's journey. This is a process. I don't self-host everything.
Right.
I've been building arguably the front-running self-hosting company in the world for 4 years, and I don't self-host everything.
Right. There you go.
I'm like kind of ashamed to admit that, but I'm also very understanding of my own life and needs and
limitations,
readiness for things, and it is what it is. You gradually protect your life. This is not an emergency. You do not need to get out. That isn't how things happen. Yes, there are acute situations, moments in time that are more dangerous than others, but largely speaking, people tend to think about history happening in these like acute events, like it's gonna collapse
tomorrow.
And that's like a singular event that takes place in 5 minutes. It's like, oh, it wasn't collapsed and now it's collapsed.
Right.
That isn't how things collapse. That isn't how history and large scale human infrastructure works.
Long drawn
These
out.
things are almost imperceptible in real time, right? Like you can see things and certain people are more perceptive than others, but mostly it's like, it is already collapsed. It's collapsing. We're in free fall. It's like the whole fucking thing is falling.
They say
this is the collapse.
You underestimate what can happen or you overestimate what can happen in a year and underestimate what can happen in a decade. And that's because of that. We don't see the inch by inch, day by day.
It's only in retrospect that you realize you lived through a revolution.
Right.
Really. I mean, there are these moments when like, it's like the Declaration of Independence was signed. That's like a moment where everyone in that room knew that something had happened.
But they weren't sure what yet.
Sure, but also the rest of the world had no idea that this was happening. Like even people in the colonies.
Right.
Were like, people were rabble-rousing and doing things, and it's like, it's like that was just one little event that took place. Right. And it's only in retrospect, a few hundred years later, we look back and we see it as this huge historical milestone. There were lots of things that got signed all the time, everywhere, all around the world. And it's like, which ones hold up, which ones withstand the test of time is only knowable in retrospect. So this is the revolution. This is the collapse. This is the transformation. This is the singularity. We're in it. We're spiraling right down into the fucking thing right now. Amazing. But the saving grace of that statement is that it's not an acute event. It is a drawn out. Yeah, there's no panic necessary here. You just need to prepare for acute events, right? Yes, there may be moments in time that are like, yes, you should be prepared to act on a 10 minutes notice or whatever. Yeah. But in all likelihood, those things are not going to happen to you. And you have time. You don't have infinite time. You should start today. This is partly why we're called Start 9, right? And it's StartOS. And all of our language is around start.
Right. So like, where does somebody start? Like
get started. Right? Just start.
Just start.
You don't need to finish.
Where do I start, man?
You just get started on your independence journey, on your digital independence journey. And so the number one place that we recommend to start is with Vaultwarden.
I knew you were going to say password manager because I was just thinking, I was like, if you don't self-host your passwords, everything else is not
correct. Passwords are your keys.
Right.
Right. So the number one thing that you should
self-host your password,
take control of immediately, is your passwords.
Do you consider a password notebook self-hosting your passwords?
Yes.
I thought you might say that.
It's just not technologically efficient.
And it's not on someone else's computer.
Just like I consider gold a hard asset and good money, right?
It's pretty soft if you get 24 carats.
It's just not the modern thing. It's like, I get, you know what I mean? Like it's analog. It's the analog equivalent of a notebook is the analog equivalent of a modern password manager. So use a password manager.
What, after the password manager, let's say you've already,
I say Bitcoin Node, obviously.
Bitcoin Node.
Yeah.
Where does something like
practical. It's not as practical
as
a password manager, but it's like, it's a cool checkpoint. You know, it's like mission accomplished.
Yeah.
Like,
especially if you're into Bitcoin.
And, yeah, of course. And it can help you get into Bitcoin. Running a node has this sort of luring effect. It like what is happening? What is this box syncing? And now you get interested. So yeah, running a node is, again, if you just click start on a Bitcoin node and you never look at it, never use it, it's not serving a purpose for you or the network.
If you're not
interacting with it. Some people
think
that is happening, right? They think that running a Bitcoin node, just sitting on their shelf and never using it, is like benefiting the network. It's not.
It's not.
It's doing nothing for you or the network. But if you run a Bitcoin node and you use that Bitcoin node, you are benefiting yourself and the network. It's funny how that works. You can't benefit yourself without benefiting the network. You can't benefit the network without benefiting yourself.
That's
why Bitcoin works.
Incentives in Bitcoin.
That's how incentives should always be. That's how societal incentives should be.
It's good for you and the group. That's a viral incentive structure.
Correct. That's why it's hard to stop. It's because the incentives align.
Right.
But so password management, I say, is number one. And honestly, I think people should just sit with that for a week or two, right? Or a month or two, whatever. Just spin up a password manager.
Vaultwarden, you said.
Yeah.
That's available on StartOS, is it not?
Yeah. And happily, it's like one of the easiest things
to build out there.
To use practically on a daily basis, right? Like Vaultwarden.
So you feel the impact of your taking self-hosting.
Yeah, it's not like just running a Bitcoin node in the background.
You don't
and it's not this like huge intensive thing like Nextcloud. It's like Vaultwarden is like this perfect middle ground of it's only going to take you one day to set it up fully. One dedicated day to understand it, to set it up, to implement it for you and your entire family. One day.
And then it's done.
And then every day thereafter, you are going to feel that sovereignty. You're going to go to sleep every night just being like, wow, like I'm doing it. And it's like robust, meaning even if the server crashes or burns, it's like my passwords aren't gone. Like I've got control. I'm protected against disaster. Nobody can interfere. All my logins are secure. It's a really nice sleep tight feeling. And that is the perfect gateway drug to the rest of self-hosting.
And there's an incentive to do it because, I mean, you saw like LastPass. It's like they weren't coming after your passwords. They didn't care about your passwords. But everybody's passwords, well, we might as well grab them while we're here, you know?
That's right.
So Start9's services that you all package, they're a wide range, right? Like I know there's a lot of Bitcoin services, and actually would like for you to explain what, like how you view services, because I know that's probably a word that people aren't super familiar with hearing. What other sort of things aside from the Bitcoin ecosystem are you all working on from a services perspective? And then, you know, looking 6 months to a year or two out, how do you see that either, you know, deepening? Like, are you guys going further into the non-Bitcoin services world, or what's the plans?
Yeah. So Start9's approach to the service ecosystem. So first of all, let's define service. Service is a server-side app. Okay, so app is the word that most people are familiar with. Yeah, so these are programs. Program is the broadest word. Okay.
So they're all programs.
Yeah, they're programs. This is
a program running on the server.
Binary code that like does stuff on a computer. Okay, it's a program.
Because it's running in the background. It's like a service.
We call them services to make it clear to the user that these are programs designed to run on a server. Could they run on a client? Sure. But that client would then be a server.
That's why like the Nextcloud
client apps run on a server, well, then that would be functioning as a client. So again, computers are computers. Whether they are a server or a client depends on what they're doing. It depends on their purpose.
Right.
So we have divided computers into these two categories. And so we've also divided programs into these two categories, being like services are things that you run on a server and apps are things that you run on a client.
On a client, okay.
Now, a lot of the industry disagrees with us. Like some pseudo competitors, you had mentioned Umbrel earlier, calls them apps. And they call them apps because that is the word people know and they lean into that. Right. I think it's ultimately a disservice because these are conceptually different. And by calling them the same name, what you're doing is you're blurring the understanding of these systems for people. People need to understand the difference between these things if they're going to use them effectively. So we're here to educate as well as provide technology, and I think calling them different names is
well. I think important. That's a total like a difference in a company approach. There's very few warning signs on the Umbrel software. I mean, I haven't used it in a while, but comparatively, like there's a lot of. I feel like from a very noob perspective, they StartOS and Umbrel and CasaOS and a bunch of these like self-hosted package OSs. From a high level, they're all aiming to accomplish the same thing.
Yes.
But where I really
ideologically,
where I've noticed such a difference is when you start drilling down into the details. Like Umbrel just freezes sometimes, or Start9's got like a change log when I. This is something very simple. When I update a package or a service, like on the Start9, it shows me the change log of like what changed. I don't think Umbrel does that.
No.
There's some very simple. So you're leading with transparency. You're leading with education, and that's how you're building that trust. Umbrel's almost, and this is not like a dig at them or whatever, but it's just a difference in business approach where they're almost like, we don't want to overwhelm you. We want you to know the bare minimum almost, so that there's no like logical barriers for you to get started.
Yeah.
Right.
There's a fundamentally different philosophy and strategy at work here when it comes to product development and business growth. We believe that what we are building is a fundamentally new product category, right? You cannot one-to-one map an existing product and category onto something new. You can borrow, and we do borrow, right? StartOS, in many ways, feels like a traditional web application or operating system, right?
Yeah.
So we've borrowed a lot of the discoveries and innovations of the last 20 to 30 years. We view SaaS, all these SaaS companies, as our R&D department, right? Like they put in the work, they spent all the money, they figured out how humans think, they figured out where the buttons should be, what colors they be, what shape they should be. So we're borrowing a lot of that, but we're applying it to a totally different product category, right? Running a server is nothing like running a client.
Right.
And so when you try to make a server feel like a client, everyone's going to be attracted to it because it's not going to be intimidating at all.
Because it's familiar.
Yeah, there's going to be like, oh, this is exactly what I've done before, except it does all this cool new stuff. But there's an inherent limitation on that design, on that user experience, because it's not a client.
Right.
You're mapping a client experience onto a server.
You're sort of painting broad brushstrokes where people may...
You're obfuscating things. You're hiding things. You're lying about things. Things won't work. It's just not going to map, right? It's like, are there conceptual overlaps with a car and a plane?
Yeah.
Like
get you from one place to another.
The design elements should be similar. Like you should... It's both a human using it. So it's like, how do humans think? Okay, it needs a dashboard. It needs buttons over here. They need to be able to reach the buttons. If the buttons are too far, it's not going to work. But it's like you can't put wings on a car. It's not going to drive down the road very well. And you can't forget wings on a plane. It's not going to fly very well.
You can skip the doors, though, apparently. Or
ultimately, what?
You saw this, the freaking airplane that had the whole side of the plane blow off, the Boeing?
No.
The whole door just flew off in mid-flight.
No, I didn't see
Anyway, that happened this week.
But right, there's some common denominators that you should borrow from and use. But ultimately, it's a different product. It's a different thing, and it needs to be assessed from first principles. And that's what we did. We designed a server product from first principles, which nobody had ever done. This is a new product category. Start9 is pioneering a new industry. I don't know if industry is the right word. A new
product
aspect of the computing industry, right?
Product
a new
category
kind of computer, like the phone. When Apple came out with the smartphone,
I don't know if that's going to work.
Had they mapped the traditional desktop experience to the smartphone, it wouldn't have worked.
Right.
They borrowed some things, but the phone was a new product category. And the server is a new product category. Servers have always been around, but home servers that are usable by normal people, is a new product category. And so we assessed it from first principles. We didn't just make it a client. We didn't just steal everything. We said, okay, what does a server need to do? How is it different from a client? And so what we did was we took the conservative approach, we'll say, and we did everything that it needs, right? And we found that it was too complicated for people to use. So then you start abstracting. Then you start shaving. Then you start optimizing. You start from first principles, and then you gradually make it accessible to everyone, right? Email went from 2 people in the world knew how to use it to everyone uses it with a swipe of their finger, but it took 20 years. We do not expect servers to be usable by everyone overnight. Umbrel did. They said, no, we're just going to completely map one-to-one the thing that exists onto a server and make it perfectly usable by everyone overnight. And we're like, that's a lie. That's irresponsible. People are going to try to use this thing and it's not going to work. It's going to crash. The plane isn't going to fly with no wings.
The door's going to blow off.
Yeah, you can't do what you're doing. You have to design it from first principles.
Yeah.
Borrow the fuck out of the previous thing. Use the design elements, use the thing. But you have to design this thing as its own product category.
Right.
And so what we did was we took the very sustainable, workable approach. We started, and it was a little difficult to use. Number got some market share on us. Who cares? The market's like 5 people.
You guys have grown significantly.
The market's 5 people. There's nobody using this shit. It's
One person.
tiny. Yeah, it's a tiny market. So market share means nothing. The whole point is the coming market.
Right.
During the next
Building
and
for
the
the
next.
future.
Yeah. So our process over the last 4 years is to take something that was basically unusable and gradually make it better and better and better. And what's coming this year, we're very excited about.
Can you tease at all? What can you talk? What can you?
The biggest challenge of running a server, I don't even know if I want to call it the biggest, but the most difficult one to solve, it might not be the biggest problem, but it's the hardest problem to solve, is network reliability. Servers only work if they serve their primary function, which is to be 24/7, 365 reachable.
Right. If you go to use the services,
Correct.
servers offline.
Servers
Might as
are
well not have
only
it.
usable insofar as they are online and working properly.
Right.
Otherwise, they're
not serving.
they're just a bad server. And so much of that has to do with network interfaces, stuff that has nothing to do with the server. The router, the ISP, like it's the connections between the devices
bridges,
that matter.
yeah.
And these things are all over the place. I have Comcast and I have my own router and I use a firewall. It's like,
You guys building the internet an ISP?
no, ISP is the final boss. It's
Okay.
not for a few years, and that'll be circumvented
StartNet.
through mesh networking.
Okay.
Ultimately, we build a new
Like the Amazon
physical infrastructure, but that's like a decade away.
Okay.
The next step is to shore up the networking connections, the network reliability. Okay, and so last year was the year of networking for Start9. It's where we put in all the labor, all the proof of work to build the new stuff. It didn't launch in 2023. 2023 was the sweat.
The building
equity.
year. Yeah.
2024 is when we go live with this stuff.
Okay.
And
Very
it
cool.
is very exciting. Like you're going to be able to, like I said earlier, with no knowledge of how anything works, basically click a button
Start.me.
and have your server and its services up and running on ClearNet domains with no thought. You can then put in a little bit of work and do it on your own domain. You can then put in a little bit more work and
Like
do
a
advanced
DDNS.
VPN stuff. And so it's like we have these tiers of like, how
hard do you
sovereign
wanna
do
make
you
it?
want
Yeah.
to be?
Yeah, sure.
Because if you're okay with being
Sovereign AF.
kind of sovereign, it's a button.
Right.
And here's the worst thing that can happen to you.
You're giving
If you
people
want to
the
be a little bit
information.
more sovereign, you have to push 3 buttons. And here's the worst that can happen
3
to you.
times as many.
And if you want to be completely sovereign, oh my God, you're going to have to put in a day of work.
Oh God, 8 buttons.
And we're very excited about
9
that
buttons.
because we think that is the right way to approach this.
Yeah,
It's
let the
this
people
like,
make their own
yes,
choice.
it's this like energy expenditure to reward, this cost benefit analysis that everyone can run for themselves that is inherent in the problem itself. This is not something we like artificially have created. It's inherent in the problem. It's like you can't be 100% sovereign with no work. It's literally an oxymoron.
Does the operating system allow you to install like custom like packages? Like for example, so I have a Proxmox server running, and then inside of that I've got a StartOS VM.
Great.
And the reason I did that is because there were some services, namely Calibri Web, like the PDF library. I got thousands of books, PDFs, and I don't want to carry them all with me and use the storage on my phone, as we were talking about, and we'll get the smallest size. So I phone home and read the PDFs from my home server wherever I am in the world. And I used to use a VPN to do that. So the reason I did that is because it doesn't have all the services. So ideally, because I really like how StartOS manages like the dashboard, the buttons.
UX of the services.
It gives me confidence. Like for example, my Calibri Web Docker container, I haven't updated it in 6 months because I have no fucking clue how. There could be some major vulnerabilities.
That's the thing about
right?
servers. They have to be maintained over time.
And it's like getting it up and running is just like step 4 because there's a lot of other stuff.
Kind of step 2, yeah.
Yeah, like
getting it up and running is
keeping it up and running, maintaining it, updating the package over time.
That's right.
And so anyway, my question is like, are we going to get to a point where I can, decide, because you guys choose which packages are in the Start9 repository, right? The community, but there's a community repository.
Registry, we call it.
Registry.
Yeah.
And is there, could we get to a point where I can just like pick and choose which services, or just someone going to have to kind of curate that list, or whether it's you or somebody else?
So today, there is no such thing as installing a program, whether a service or an app, daemon, whatever, onto your computer.
Is that what they're called?
If that...
Demons? I thought it was Daemon.
I did too at first.
It's actual Daemon. Anyway, okay.
I mean, you can call it a daemon. Some people do. Some people choose to because they don't like calling it a daemon because of the word. But like, I think the most predominant pronunciation is demon.
All right.
Yeah.
Not to sidetrack you.
There's a book called Daemon. It's really cool.
And it's about the computer demons.
Yeah. It's about a computer demon. Super genius computer engineer, game developer dies, and on his death, it triggers like a dead man switch that triggers this globally distributed, decentralized demon that's reacting to news events.
No way.
And is like murdering people.
What?
And just like, and like.
This is called Daemon?
Taking over banks. Yeah, it's called Daemon.
All
It's
right,
super
I'm
cool.
going to have to check that out.
Like
That sounds pretty awesome.
Cool.
That sounds
it's like
pretty cool.
a little over the top.
Yeah, it's like a sci-fi movie.
But it's really intelligent and super geeky for software engineers and people who are into tech. And it's called Daemon. And then the next one is called Freedom TM, which deals with the aftermath of like once the demon has basically like conquered Earth and everyone's under its control. It's like, we want you to be free, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, anyway.
Gosh, it's a deep story.
It's big. It's sort of epic in scope. It comes across as kind of like superficially just like Hollywood kind of, but no, it's deep, it's intelligent, it's political in nature. It gets into political ideology, and it's really cool.
Of course, it's technology.
Daniel Suarez, the
author.
Yeah, Daemon and Freedom TM are the 2 books.
And so whether it's... sorry, I didn't mean to sidetrack you.
Regardless of what kind of program you're running,
whether it's a daemon or not.
It must be packaged in a way that the operating system you're running on can consume it.
Okay.
There's no such thing as running something on Mac without downloading the Mac binary. There's no such thing as running something on Linux without downloading the Linux binary, right? Like,
.dev or
exactly. So
or .exe on Windows.
There is this tendency from our users to want to like run something on StartOS that has not been packaged for StartOS. And I'm like, no, you can't do that.
So it needs to be specifically packaged for StartOS?
Yeah.
Or there are things that are unique about StartOS that requires it to be that way instead of just putting it on, is it like Debian under the hood? Or
Well, it's based on Debian, but it's its own
custom,
animal.
Okay,
Oh,
so you can't just throw any Debian program
Mac in some ways is based on Linux, but it's fucking Mac.
Right,
It's completely different operating system.
Right.
StartOS is a different operating system. It's not like these other pseudo operating systems like Casa or Umbrel or Minode. These are all just Ubuntu, and they themselves are an app.
Right, like a Docker,
Umbrel is an app.
That's why I couldn't install Umbrel on a VM in Proxmox. I needed to install Debian and then go and install Umbrel on top of that.
Umbrel's an app, yeah. It's a Debian app.
With StartOS, that's the whole computer.
It is the OS.
Yes, correct.
StartOS is a legitimate operating system.
So they call it UmbrelOS, but it's a misnomer in that capacity.
So many people use OS on their products these days, and I'm like, it's really an app with a dashboard. Stop calling it an OS.
Right.
Like that has a legitimate meaning. It's like false advertising, right? And I'm not even like
because OS is talking to the kernel, and it's like
Yeah, I'm not sitting here being like you're like misleading people, and that's hurting our business. I'm like, you're literally causing confusion.
It's just
like,
confusing.
You're causing the entire ecosystem to be confused.
Right.
It'd be like if I sold a hamburger and called it a hot dog. Can you imagine if McDonald's called their hot dogs hamburgers? How much, or their hamburgers hot dogs? How much? How would
just start saying like?
Be so stupid.
No, it's always been a hot dog.
I can't believe nobody's done that. Why has no fast food chain just trolled the fuck out of the human species and just called their hamburgers hot dogs?
I did see something like that similar where this guy bought a bunch of he bought a bunch of New York strip steaks and they had labeled it as like chicken thigh.
Yeah.
And so he thought he was getting a good deal. And then I looked at the price. I was like, they just put chicken thigh on the title. It's still $12.99 a pound. That ain't chicken thighs.
I just imagine
Just
the
call it what it
chaos
is.
that would reign from someone going through a drive-thru and being like, "I'd like a hot dog, please." and
You
then
guys
getting a
know
hamburger.
what to do on April Fools. You got
true.
a little renaming scheme.
Just call it an app.
Yeah.
Call StartOS an app and really brain fuck everyone. No, anyway, we're being stupid, but like,
Sorry.
Yeah, it's an OS.
Call it an app.
It's an
I love
operating
it.
system. And as an operating system, it can consume binaries that are packaged for it. Now, in many cases, especially with Linux, offering a program for Ubuntu versus offering it for Debian
Trivial.
might be
difference.
negligible
Right.
difference. In fact, they might even be able to consume the same package format in some cases.
Yeah.
StartOS does not.
All right. Well,
StartOS is sufficiently different from these other OSs, right? And by necessity, it's not like, oh, we want to be different. That's the worst thing you can do as a growing product or company is to cause people unnecessary hassle and gatekeeping. We didn't do it because we wanted to be different.
it was out of necessity. To
Yeah, because
design
it
what you
does
want.
things that those things can't do. In order for, like, what StartOS does is completely unprecedented in the history of computing, right? What StartOS does is it takes all the Linux sysadmin command line requirements and activities that would be necessary to run a service
Turns it into a button.
program on a Linux server,
Yeah.
and it turns it into forms and buttons and
It's
very
easy.
very
So easy.
relatable.
So
things.
easy.
That isn't magic. It does that because the service was packaged to accommodate the StartOS APIs, the StartOS functionality
In that capacity.
that then presents it to the user.
Okay.
StartOS is the middleman.
Specifically designed.
Yeah,
that way.
StartOS is the middleman. StartOS is like, okay, I'm talking to the hardware to make sure that the hardware is happy. I'm talking to the user to make sure that the user knows how to administer things. And I'm talking with the
guarantees they're
service.
happy.
So the operating system is sitting between three parties. It's sitting between the service or program that's running. It's sitting between the service, the hardware
itself,
and the
right.
user, and the outside world.
The network.
Correct.
The greater
So it's
network, right?
the internet, right? The greater network, the WAN. So you have StartOS as the middleman of all of this. It's what facilitates all these interactions. So you have some service that just doesn't want to play ball. It's like the user is expecting this button to exist, sir. You need to tell me what that button does.
Map it to something,
Correct.
right?
And so packaging a service for StartOS starts with the upstream binary. That's the beginning point. It's like, okay, here's the service as it would be installed on Debian.
we have to modify it.
We called it a wrapper originally. We still call it a wrapper colloquially, right? It's a wrapper. You take the binary and you wrap it with data, metadata, and functions that accommodate the needs of StartOS.
The interface and all this. Okay. I think I'm understanding.
The service tells StartOS about the service so that StartOS can then tell the user about the service in a friendly way.
Okay.
It's a translator. But if the service doesn't tell StartOS about itself, then
Then it
StartOS
doesn't know
can't
what to translate to.
cannot translate that to the user. And this is unique to StartOS and Start9.
Okay.
All the other things we're talking about, again, are just the upstream services
They're just packaging
running
Docker.
on bare metal. So their function, these other pseudo OSs and products, the problem that they are solving, like the actual problem they solve in the world, the function that they serve, their purpose, is to get somebody up and running as quickly and seamlessly as possible on a server. It's like, okay, you weren't running Nextcloud on a personal server. Now you are. That's it.
But as we said, this is not a
Correct. That is not a
overnight-
hard problem to solve.
Right.
That's a trivial fucking problem to solve. The hard problem to solve about self-hosting is the perpetual administration of the service and the server.
Right.
Getting spun up is nothing. I could go to someone's house and whip out their mini PC and run a bunch of command lines and be like, all right, your server's up and running, and then leave. That person's like, Now what?
They're never going to do anything with it ever again.
That
it's
thing.
Stuck in that state.
One little thing goes wrong and I'm screwed, right? We have designed a sustainable system that enables a normal person to administer a server. That's completely unprecedented in the history of computing.
That is such a great one-liner. I think I'll use that for a clip. Because,
what did I say? I don't even remember.
Well, good thing it's recorded. You said that basically you're allowing for a user to be able to manage and be
ongoing.
You're allowing an everyday Joe like me who is interested in computers, who likes computers, but doesn't know the ins and outs of becoming a sysadmin to actually administer my system.
Yeah.
Whereas, just as a very obvious example, they're both running on the same machine. I've got a Proxmox server running StartOS, and then in a container is Calibri. My StartOS packages, all up to date. Everything's working fine. Calibri is sitting there in the state that I installed it on, and it always will. I can't touch it because every time I do anything with it, I break it. Yeah. I can't connect to the port anymore, and I have no idea where to start. This is what
people don't understand about servers.
So it's the maintenance of it.
They're extremely hard to maintain.
It's
very easy to get them spun up and install something because the README for these things is run this command, click that button, and you're like, oh my God, I did it. And you feel so competent.
Right.
But then it's 3 months later, you have no idea what to do anymore.
And this is why people are scared to self-host, because they're like, I don't want to put all my stuff on the self-hosting, and then I can't, something breaks, and then all the shit's gone.
Yeah. So we're solving a fundamentally hard problem. Mm-hmm. We're doing it from first principles. We're doing it responsibly, sustainably, and that is unique. Mm-hmm. There's nobody doing what we're doing. Mm-hmm. And we're doing it in a very principled way. Open source, non-proprietary, belongs to the world. We're just here to help. We are its benefactors, its shepherds, right? We're its supporters, but it's really important that it doesn't belong to us. Because if it did, it could never achieve its full potential. Because there would always be a corporate interest that we would be fiduciarily obligated to.
Giving people the information to make their own decisions, which is, I think we were talking about that in sort of the beginning, is how much of this barrier to self-hosting is that their technical ability, their knowledge, by leading people to simplify the decisions that they're making. You can host it with us. Here's the pros and cons. Mm-hmm. You can do it like that, but a little more advanced, or you can, go way down the sovereign rabbit hole and do it like this. You're giving people the information because they're not going to know it all to make the decision that fits best for them, because there is not a single solution for everyone. What's
important about that whole thing, though, is that even the worst case scenario in our model is the best case scenario in the prior model. So there's a qualitative step function improvement in the model itself. So now we're okay, you can do it the non-sovereign way, but the non-sovereign way is still 99.9% sovereign compared to the current way. Right. So even if you choose the non-sovereign way, it's the worst possible thing that can happen to you is that you can't reach your stuff for 3 hours.
Right, which could happen at any time if the government or entity doesn't want to let you use it.
So it's not an evolutionary thing. It is a revolutionary thing. It is a new way of thinking about how humans and computers interact at a fundamental level. And because of that, the implications of it are far-reaching. So this is something we haven't talked about yet, and I'll touch on briefly here, and if you want to dig in, we can. But what do people use computers for, right? We're talking about redefining the human-computer relationship to exclude third parties, to put normal people in charge of their servers and then connect to those servers from around the world. Well, what are they going to do at that point? Well, it's very easy to imagine things like messaging or password management or file storage and photo sharing and running a Bitcoin node. That's all what I would refer to as software use cases. But software use cases of computers is actually a very small segment of how humans are going to use computers in the coming decades. Right? There's two other very important, fundamentally different categories that will overlap but are different and should be talked about separately, ways that humans are going to use computers. One of them is artificial intelligence. which, yes, is software, but it's so fundamentally different type of software that needs such fundamentally different hardware that it needs to be talked about differently from like messaging and data.
Okay.
Artificial intelligence uses a different type of computer, different computing needs, and is used for different purposes than a dumb file server. And so the revolution in AI over the last 2 years
Crazy.
is really mind-blowing. Raises a lot of existential questions and challenges. And our view, as is the view of many others actually, is widely supported view, is that this cannot be in the hands of like 3 people. That it is very, very important that individuals, families, businesses have the ability
Their own AI
to
models.
train and use their own AI models for their own private purposes. That it is extremely dangerous to hand total control over this stuff. And the saving grace of that statement is that it's basically impossible for this to become completely centralized, right? It's too easy to do yourself. Like, it's too easy. These things are open. The models are out there. The cat's out of the bag. Like, this isn't going to happen. There's no moat. These companies, Google and them, OpenAI, they don't have a defensible moat. They kind of know it. I think they're doing a money grab and trying to get as much out of the hype as they can and then retire on the beach. I think they understand that they don't have a defensible business model. However, there is no clear way in which people are going to do this on their own. A lot of people are hacking different things together, and they're all kind of based on the SaaS model still. There's just like a proliferation of them. And we're like, no, we're going to be the dark horse here. And we're going to take the extremist stance and be like, no, these things are going to run
at your house
locally. We're talking about edge computing here.
Right, is that not the computational, like the hardware constraints? Is that not going to become a...
Absolutely it will be. Yeah. And we're behind the curve. We, the world, right? Like does not exist.
I shouldn't have sold that ETH mining graphics card.
Cheap AI acceleration edge computing hardware. It just doesn't exist. You want to do AI training from your home? Give me $10,000.
Sure.
Yeah, that's what it's going to cost you. There's nothing affordable. There's nothing that a normal average person is.
Because you got to rent all the graphics cards.
It's graphic. Yeah, it's all GPUs. Yeah. Super expensive NVIDIA GPUs.
No wonder they're the 3rd most valuable stock in the world.
Yeah. So that's going to change.
You think so?
Not the NVIDIA thing. I don't speculate on that. But like, what's happening right now is pretty awesome.
The arrangement.
Over the coming years, there is going to emerge new types of consumer hardware that are capable of doing pretty substantial AI operations and accelerations. And we're keeping a very close eye on that, talking to multiple companies who are innovating in these areas to make sure that when those consumer hardware components are available, we are selling servers with them installed so that people who use StartOS and rely on Start9 for our expertise and support can then run their own private AI models. Now, we already offer this on StartOS.
Right. Free GPT.
Stable Diffusion and Free GPT are already available, but they're super slow. They're kind of dumb. Yeah. You're going to use Midjourney and ChatGPT. Let's face it. You're going to go to them even though you have these things because they're just better. They're faster.
But that gap
that's going to change.
Is closing.
We're going to close that gap very quickly over the next few years.
Yeah.
And then the second way that humans use computers that is extremely important is devices, smart devices.
The types of devices are going to...
Cameras and fitness bracelets, health bracelets that track your
sensors everywhere,
heart rate, and like the world. We tend to be all proud as a species looking around the world and be like, wow, we have things that like are connected. It's nothing compared to what's coming.
Everything
will have
an IP address.
Everything is wired up. Yeah. The future is a completely connected physical world where your body might have 30 computers in it.
Oh, geez.
This is good.
This is good?
It's amazing as long as it's your computers and your data.
I think that's a great...
Who doesn't want...
Great point to re-highlight.
Yeah, that's the... See, everyone's afraid of this future because of the model. It's being built on the cloud computing model. Under the cloud computing model, the connected world is horrifying. Yeah. It's the worst possible timeline in the future.
Under a self-hosted world, though, that's
under a sovereign computing model.
Yeah, wow.
The connected world is like the freedom of the human species. Yeah. It's like what we've always wanted. It's computers serving our every needs. It's computers keeping us alive, keeping us healthy. monitoring everything, drawing correlations, and so it's incredible. And this is happening.
Yeah.
The like super smart connected world is happening. It's like the number one thing on the minds of all the board members at Google, on Apple. Maybe AI has taken some mind share in the recent years.
Yeah.
But like IoT is the thing.
I got my router is like, I just think back, like I got like 30 or 40 devices connected to my router. And like 10 years ago, there were a few.
Yeah.
A few.
It's gonna go exponential at some point.
There's hundreds.
Here.
I'm gonna have more than 250.
And to be
55.
honest, part of what's holding it back is the cloud computing model, because there's no way to cost effectively, from a business standpoint, launch an IoT device without building out the subscription model and there's a limit to what people can take, right?
Yeah.
People cannot pay 50 different monthly subscriptions for 50 different devices and manage 50 different dashboards.
Sure.
The consolidation hasn't happened yet.
Right.
But it's coming. That's
coming.
what Google is going for. They're
Right.
trying to bring your entire
doing that.
life into a single Google.
Apple's trying to do the same thing. And,
Right.
Yep.
And so again, we're going to be the dark horse here that comes in and is like, no. People are going to build their own little micro ecosystems. They're going to
cool.
have tons of devices that are all synced together on private networks, with the data being collected, analyzed, and stored on private servers that nobody
control.
even knows about.
Right.
And making that happen, making that statement into reality is a like legitimate hard problem. That's not something you just cook up on a slide deck. That's
Right.
like serious, effort in every line of business, from procurement and material sourcing to design,
The
to
whole
software
thing, yeah.
engineering, to marketing. It's like this huge endeavor we're talking about.
Right.
But if we, or some combination of us and others, can pull it off, we think it just affords a future that is worthy of our children and grandchildren. And on top of it, it's just way more economically efficient. It just cuts out all the middlemen. Like, it just literally is a better economic model of computing because it doesn't involve middlemen.
Right.
Cutting out middlemen is the essence of economic efficiency.
So do you think, and I've got to go to the bathroom, so we're gonna wrap up here.
Yeah.
Two questions. Do you think that our whole conversation considered, obviously there are, if we look at any specific point with a microscope, we can focus on the bad, the parts of the trend that are getting worse, the reliance and the convenience and complacency of using custodial services, and whether it's Bitcoin or your personal data, you're storing all your shit on Google Drive. Is that getting better? I know we talked about it's getting easier to self-host. Do you see the overall trend improving, or is it more dire than ever that we have rally the sirens, you need to self-host, you need to start now?
The latter.
Yeah. Getting worse.
Well, luckily, happily, the niche subculture that values computing independence, digital independence, self-hosting is growing. But the people who don't are doubling down. They're falling faster and deeper into the net than ever. So there's this widening gap between the two people. Do you see this with Bitcoin and fiat as well?
Yeah.
There's the Bitcoiners, and that's growing. But the people who aren't Bitcoiners are doubling down on fiat.
Right.
It's this last ditch effort to no matter
favorite.
what, I'm going down with the ship type of thing.
So Bitcoiners like too.
And so I think that carries over to the broader computing paradigm as well, is that people sense that something is wrong. They might even intuit more specifically what is wrong, but they have no idea what to do. They feel hopeless to do anything about it. And in part, that's because they're not aware of solutions like Start9. So our job is to get better at marketing. It would certainly help if some or multiple really despicable politicians would take notice of us
Oh, like get you in the crosshairs? Because
talk shit about
that would
us.
be great for your publicity. Yeah.
Like I'm really wanting that.
Yeah.
It's been it's the best PR we could possibly
It's free
get.
too.
And it's like I keep saying openly, I'm like, this technology is like super dangerous. Like people can use these computers to evade law enforcement. They can they can
Come write a news story about us.
self-host 3D models for gun printing, and it's like, and it's like we're just like easily making it available to everyone. It's totally legal. It's totally moral. It's a computer running software. You could run the same shit on a Mac, right? The difference between Mac OS and StartOS is that StartOS is optimized for server-side software, but ultimately the way that plays out, right, the essence of that is benign. It's like, oh, you're making an operating system for a server. That's nothing. It's completely legal, totally benign. But the incentive structure it creates, what you can do with it, has real
Much
implications, and it's only a matter of time before the wrong/right people take notice of this and in a way come after us. And I'm like, on the one hand, I don't want that because I kind of want to be left alone. I'm a peaceful person. But on the other hand, I'm like, I know it's the only way this is ever going to take off is if the people that everyone hates hate us. Well, so I'm just like, why haven't they? What do I got to do?
The haters are coming. Don't you worry.
I want more haters. The right haters, though.
This whole kind of conversation I've been thinking, kind of like sum it up with one of my favorite lines is that you can, we're talking about in the very beginning, like technology is a tool, right? A hammer is a tool, right? You can use a hammer.
Build a house.
You build a house, build a village, you can break a hand, and destroy your fingers. And just aim it wrong. So it really is about just as important on how we use the technology, how we use those tools, right, as it is that they exist. And if politicians getting StartOS in the crosshairs is what creates more awareness that they exist.
Look,
I don't know, that's not so bad.
Historically and present day, there are technologists who always feel morally exempt from the technology they design. They say technology has no opinion. A hammer is a hammer. It can be used to build a house or it can be used to smash a hand.
Right.
It's not true, in a sense. Yes, it can be. But you know when you're building it what people are going to use it for.
Yeah.
You know because you know what the world needs. You're not just a technologist. You're a businessman. There's somebody funding you. And you know what their target market is.
With that product.
Right? So it's like, I'm going to design a hammer, right? But I'm going to black out the fact that I know everyone's going to use it to smash fingers. You're morally culpable, right? However, if you're designing a hammer and you know that it's being marketed towards and will be predominantly used for building houses, but you recognize the possibility that somebody will use it to smash fingers, you're morally culpable if you don't design it. Because it's about
you can't control what people do.
The dominant use case, correct. Right. You cannot control people misusing the product.
And you're not telling them to do it that way.
Yeah, it's like, how is this thing intended to be used and how is it being marketed? Matters. Even if it can be misused in other ways, right? It's what is needed. What is the actual demand of the marketplace? Right? Do people need hammers to smash hands, or do the people need hammers to build houses?
Smash hands with
Most people need hammers
things
to build houses, correct.
Right.
So StartOS is being built for, marketed towards, and the market demand for it is for entirely peaceful, defensive, righteous purposes.
Right.
The fact that some people will misuse it is not my fucking problem. There's nothing I can do to stop that. And not inventing the technology because I recognize that some people will misuse it is incredibly irresponsible.
Yeah.
Because there's a important and growing market demand for the ability to take control of one's digital life. And so I'm catering to that market demand. If someone misuses it, fuck off.
You can't control all of it.
But I would love for the wrong people to react to that potential use case loudly because it will illuminate the positive use case and put us on the radar. So if any of you are listening, go ahead and talk shit.
Yeah. Well, Where can listeners find out more about Start9, and what would you say is a good step if they want to really dig into the product or learn more about what you do?
The obvious one is start9.com. From there, you can find our community channels. We are active, very active. I'm basically reachable in a moment's notice.
Unreasonable support.
I'm unreasonably available for what I actually do, as is everyone on the team. Yeah. So we're easy we're easy to find, we're easy to communicate with, and my ultimate message here is, if this resonates with you, if you understand somewhat the nature of the problem and the nature of the solution, start.
Just start.
Just start. You don't need to do it all. You don't need to finish. You don't need to understand every drop. Just take that first step, reach out to us, let us help you step by step, and we will get you slowly at your own pace to a point where you are impervious to all the crap that's about to happen, is already happening and was going to continue to happen over the next decade. So start now before it's too late. That's it.
Well said. Okay. Start.
9.
And start listening to the next episode after you hit that subscribe button. Matt, thank you so much for coming on, man. It's been
thanks for having me.
It's been a pleasure, and we talked about a lot of this at BitDevs. It's another 2 hours of this conversation. I feel like there's 24 hours more we could go.
Yeah,
and a
we'll
year
do it
from,
again. We'll do it again sometime.
Right.
A year from now, things will be different.
A year from now, things will be super different, and I'm excited to see the hard work that you all have put in last year start to come to fruition.
Yeah, big things come in this year. Thanks.
Absolutely.
Okay.